Hey, what's up, everybody? We have a new YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe right now. Leave a comment on the video. Share it with your friends. It's also a podcast, 3 and Out, wherever you listen with me, John Middlekauff, Apple, Spotify. We have you covered, as well as thevolume.com. We have merch. Check out. I got 3 and Out hats right now. Thevolume.com. Search the podcast. Buy some merch. Okay, let's do a little mailbag. At John Middlekauff, is the Instagram. Fire in those DMs. Love the pod. As a Raider fan, I have to ask, should we trade up for Jayden Daniels or Drake May? Sit on our first rounder and see if a quarterback falls to us, or go get a guy like Cousins or Fields? Well, if we just assume, and as we're sitting here today, I think it's fair, it's going to go in some order: Caleb, May, Daniels, or Caleb, Daniels, May. Those guys are going 1, 2, 3. All the 3 teams need a quarterback, right? I would expect the Bears to trade Fields in the next, I don't know, 10, 15 days. So they will take Caleb Williams. And then it just comes down to Washington is taking a quarterback. I'm pretty sure New England is too. So I don't even think that's going to be an option. I've seen a lot of people kind of act like Russell Wilson to the Raiders. Remember, once upon a time, Russell Wilson wanted, remember when he was mad at Seattle and was like, if you are going to trade me, this is before the trade, these would be some teams I'd be interested in. I think it was like New Orleans, the Cowboys, I think, which is weird because they had Dak, but at the time, people viewed him as better than Dak. And the Raiders were one of them. I forget the fourth, maybe the Giants. And now Antonio Pierce is like an old school player. Maybe he wouldn't even like Russell Wilson, but I could see Mark Davis wanting a little star power. That's something to keep an eye on. I would say that's something definitely keep an eye on. Do you think the Panthers would draft Caleb if they had the number 1 overall pick? And if so, what would they do with Bryce Young? It's a good question. I don't know. That's a really good question. I think as a prospect, if they were in the draft last year, the Panthers would have taken Bryce Young. Or excuse me, Caleb Williams. Bryce Young would not be a Panther. The problem is, once you invest in taking a guy, you'd have to really hate him. Like, it was pretty clear that they didn't like Josh Rosen year 1. So when they took Kyler Murray, it was kind of a double whammy. 1, Kyler was a much better prospect than Josh. But 2, it was just Cliff came, new staff. I think that, that being said, I think they just would. What they would do with Bryce, like, what's his trade value? Honestly, what could they get for Bryce Young? 3rd round pick? I don't even think they'd get a 2nd right now. I mean, last year, and listen, his career is not done. But based on last year, and that's all we have to go off of, I watched some of those Carolina games would be strong. I mean, I paid attention to him on one of the little boxes. You would watch series and be like, God, this guy looks overwhelmed. I think the craziest part is that he looks really small. Question for the bag. The Commanders and Titans should be big players this offseason. Neither team has much in the way of long-term pieces. They are number 1 and 2 in the most cap space. They both have top 10 picks. With Peters and Rand Carthen running those teams, how do you think they look to build the roster? Here's the problem with cap space, is when you say it out loud, it sounds really good, right? You just go, I got $70, $80 million in cap space. And it is important because it gives you flexibility. But then you look at the free agents. You're like, let's go sign T. Higgins. Let's go sign the D lineman from the Ravens. Let's go sign whoever. All the best free agents always get tagged. Always. So the best free agents that actually hit the open market, look at last year, the highest paid guys. It was like McGlinchey. It was Javon Hargrave. It's starters. But like I said, you have to pay a premium because this is what you have to do in free agency. Like, you have to pay a 30, 40% markup. And you're not getting some super, super high impact player. Most of the time. Every once in a while you do, but there's a reason the guy's hitting free agency. So I guess That's a long-winded way of saying I think you kind of have to see who ends up hitting the open market and then kind of be careful. Now, you also can't afford to overpay a guy or two, but that's not really how you want to conduct business. You don't just want to overpay because, like, I can't overpay. I got the cap space. That's not always the best way to operate. And that's where I think it makes it very, very kind of challenging as a GM with a lot of ammo. Because you're like, well, who am I spending this on? If I go get like Mike Evans and Trent Williams and fucking, sweet impact players, right? Roquan Smith. Some of those guys are free agents. Some of them are clearly not. I'm just good players are popping into my mind. Yeah, I'd go buy them. But this isn't baseball or basketball. Like Aaron Judge, Shohei Ohtani is not exactly on the free agent market. Get in on the action with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. New customers who deposit $5 or more can get a no-sweat bet up to $1,000 back in a bonus bet. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use the code JOHN. New customers can get a no-sweat bet up to $1,000 if your first bet loses. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code JOHN. The crown is yours. When you worked for the Eagles, was it obvious that Vick was better than Cobb? I know Cobb was supposed to be the starter, then he got hurt. Crazy to think that after Vick got out of prison, more teams didn't want to sign him since they were scared of the fan backlash. I feel the situation was on par with DeShaun Watson getting $240 million. I got to push back on that. Michael Vick went to Leavenworth. Google, for those of you that don't know, Google Leavenworth. Never been there. It's not a fucking place you want to go. He went to prison. DeShaun Watson, now it was clear he was guilty, right? He got caught red-handed. DeShaun Watson tried to act like he did nothing wrong, which, a lot of he said, she said, which, listen, whenever it's a one-on-one situation, I always go, I have no clue, right? No clue. That's always my stance. We know how the media operates. Matt Ariza, kick Matt Ariza out of football for life. Turns out she's lying. He had nothing to do with it. No, the media never says shit. That's why my reaction always is, I don't know. I was not there. How could I have an opinion on this? And it's why Matt Ariza is back in the league, because he was innocent, right? And you get a lot of these situations. DeShaun Watson had like almost 30 girls coming after him. It was unlike anything I've ever seen. So DeShaun Watson didn't do any prison time. DeShaun Watson didn't get in any trouble. So I don't think they're comparable. Michael Vick was out of football for a couple of years. Now, that's the one comparable part, but it was because he was behind bars. DeShaun was like going to practice playing scout team safety, remember? I remember getting to practice when I first got hired at OTAs. It would have been 2010. And coming from Fresno State, Derek Carr was a young guy on our team. And Derek had a pretty big arm. And I remember thinking, like, God, this guy's arm isn't that good. And, Kevin was athletic, but he just didn't have a very good arm. And then he got KO'd in that game against the Packers week 1, and Michael Vick came in. The rest was history. Kevin never played again. I think he ended up playing a couple games because Vick got hurt that year, but obviously got traded that offseason. It's hard, though. I would say this in the OTA setting. If you don't, like, Michael Vick's going to look good in an OTA setting. He's got a huge arm. Now, he's Michael Vick, so you knew. But if you go to an OTA setting with a guy with a big arm, they're going to look good in that situation. And the guy with an average arm, like Phillip Rivers, some of those type guys are probably not going to look super great in OTAs. Realize fans dream player trades in the NFL more than reality, but given the aggressiveness for quarterback picks, one occurred to me. Given Minnie needs a quarterback and has a number 1 wide receiver, a good cheap one in Addison, how would the Bears, teams in the top 3, react to a trade of Jefferson, especially the Bears, who have number 9? Minnesota would never trade Justin Jefferson there. So imagine the Bears trading Minnesota number 1 and getting Jefferson. You can't do that in your division. One, obviously you would need a quarterback more than Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson's a great player. But if you could have a top 10 quarterback, that guy's more valuable than Justin Jefferson. But you can't do deals like that in your division. It's just, You can't do it. Because if it fails for you and works for them, everyone in that building is getting fired. If Justin Jefferson's catching touchdowns on you in Chicago. So I know what you're saying. It's just not even an option, I guess is the long way to put it. You can't do deals like that in your division. Will the launch of the Warner Brothers cable streaming service be the end of YouTube TV? I'd be lying if I know all the details of that. I did read some people aren't too happy with that, like the NFL. So we'll see if it actually goes down, but I hope not. I was just watching YouTube TV today. Plan on watching it later tonight. I love YouTube TV. I always see people just assuming that teams like the Niners will restructure players' contracts like Debo, Trent, and other stars to open up space. Can you speak on the likelihood of stuff like that actually? And if it's so easy, then why doesn't every team restructure all their players? Well, when you restructure your players, you basically just give them more money up front and you are able to cook the books and move money on the books back. So you only do it to guys, like let's use an example of a team. Who's a good team? The Chiefs. They could restructure Kelsey or Mahomes pretty easily. Those guys are not going anywhere. Or the Bills with Josh Allen. But anytime like Debo Samuel, would you restructure Debo Samuel where in a year you like might be open to moving him? That's where you got to get very careful. Trent Williams, you could do that for sure. Fred Warner, you could do that. Like, am I going to restructure George Kittle or Debo Samuel? Like what if I want to have some flexibility with those two players next year? So I think a lot of it's just giving them money right now to then be able to fudge the books for the next couple years. But when you do it to players who you might move, it can, it can just be risky. So you only want to do it to guys, and that's the problem with the NFL. This isn't basketball where this guy's going to be on the team the next 7 years. In 2 years, shit can change fast. Injuries, guy could fall off a cliff. So it's complicated that way. Big fan of the pod. If you were the Bears, would you give Jaylen Johnson a contract extension? I'm of the school of thought that you need to pay a top corner to have a successful secondary. Look at the Chiefs. Both their corners are on rookie deals. And it is looking more and more likely they don't pay Snead and have to tag him. Wondering what your thoughts are. I think whenever you draft good players, now I guess Ryan Poles technically didn't draft Jaylen Johnson, but you either draft good players or you inherit good players who are young, and then those guys go on to be impact players. It's in your best interest to keep them. And if you're able to trade Justin Fields, why wouldn't you pay your good players on your roster? You just paid Sweat. You paid Jaylen Johnson. All of a sudden, your defense is pretty good, right? And part of drafting Caleb Williams is he makes $35 million over 5 years. Even though he's not making nothing because he's the number one overall pick, he's still relatively cheap compared to top quarterbacks. So if he becomes a top 12 guy, all of a sudden you have a quarterback who enables you to pay other guys in your roster. So I think that's where the Chiefs get problematic is they have some high expenses, right? Mahomes makes a lot of money. Chris Jones the last couple of years made a lot of money. So now they can kind of start, I guess, spreading out the love a little bit moving forward. But I think the key is if a team like the Bears, they're going to have a quarterback on a rookie contract, is to be overly aggressive. Is the easiest way for a young player to be good, playing a good team. So having Jaylen Johnson there helps. If the Bears next year are a top 10 defense, makes it a lot easier for the young quarterback. What was the problem this year for Caleb Williams? His fucking defense was horrendous. It's one of the worst defenses I've ever seen for a team that should have been decent, like USC. I mean, they were, you can't even put into words how terrible they were. I mean, they were god awful, and it put so much pressure on. So, and a lot of young quarterbacks go to teams that defenses suck. And when that's the case, you just always kind of feel like you're fighting an uphill battle. I'm a college baseball player at an NAI school in Northern California. I had the opportunity to play football coming out of college, and deeply regret my decision to play baseball. I'm a business-minded person and want to get involved in sports again. Where should I start? I would get involved with your athletics program. I would immediately, if you want to get involved with your school's football program, get involved that way. If you graduate and want to get like a graduate degree, try to become a graduate assistant somewhere. Try to get in recruiting. Try to get in somewhere that way where you can get your foot in the door. But I would say you're still young. You have the opportunity to immediately kind of keep it rolling. So to me, the easiest route always is to get involved in college athletics. I had an idea for the Tuesday segment about the idea of Topic Tuesday. What about Tasty Tuesday? And get that bad boy sponsored by a food brand if possible. God, now we're Tasty Tuesday. I like that. Maybe Tasty Tuesday, and we try to find some spicy takes. I love the show and even gotten into golf based on listening to Go Low. Keep killing the game. Jesse, I appreciate it. I like Tasty Tuesday. Longtime listener, huge Lions fan. Good time to be you. The narrative the entire season was how cooked the secondary was, and that would seem like a no-brainer first-round pick. But I'm of the opinion developing the trenches is the first priority, especially getting another edge rusher to enhance Hutchinson. I think if you can stop a dominant rush, you drop back more. And all of a sudden, a below-average secondary becomes above average. I totally agree. Like, ideally, you'd like to have, fucking Richard Sherman or Revis playing corner. It's very hard to find those guys. And you're good now, so you're picking in the 20s. You can never go wrong with the offensive and defensive line. If you told me for 10 straight years a team, if they had a quarterback, took an O lineman or a D lineman, I don't think how anyone would complain. Because if you're good in the trenches, your team's going to be good. Why was your offense good? Yeah, I mean, Gibbs, the running back, and Montgomery are good players. Laporta's a stud. Your offensive line is awesome. I mean, you had arguably the best or one of the best offensive lines in the league. So why does your quarterback look a lot better? It's not like he's scrambling around. It's because he's not getting touched. So I'm a huge, huge believer in just building it in the trenches. And if you get Hutchinson, another friend, a high-end friend. But I would say this. Your guys' front office is pretty good. I mean, they proved last year to be that what they've done the last, I would say, 18 months to turn this thing around, to add the players. I mean, even going back to when they wanted Goff, but last year's draft was pretty incredible. I think you got to have a lot of faith. You really do. You got your offensive coordinator coming back. I mean, I think this team is right up there with the Niners as being one of the teams that, you would pick just to be in the Super Bowl next year. They got every guy coming back. How are they not going to be really, really good? Now, you would say their division, I mean, the Bears more than likely are going to have a rookie quarterback. Who knows what Minnesota's going to do at quarterback? They might have a rookie quarterback, or they might have Cousins coming off an Achilles. And the Packers, I mean, should be a lot better. But there's a lot different pressure on kind of getting to fly under the radar this year, starting slow. Now, like everyone's looking at, I'm going to pick the Packers to win 11, 12 games. We'll see if Jordan Love can answer the bell. Hope he does, because I like watching him play, but there's no guarantee. We see a lot of quote-unquote flash-in-the-pan quarterbacks. It's hard to play. I'm not saying that's what I think he's going to be, but we'll see him prove it. Like, you've seen now, Jared Goff, when his team's good, have a ton of success on multiple different franchises. The Lions are pretty set up. To me, the key of this draft, just have a solid draft. Like, your secondary is not going to be awesome next year. But like you said, if your pass rush is elite, if you can turn that unit into one of the better, defensive lines in the NFL, yeah, it makes it a lot easier on the secondary.